Alice, happy publication day for book number 4. How do you feel?
I feel really good. Thank you so much. It's such a treat to have you interviewing me. It's so nice to have someone that knows me so well asking me some questions. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to our chat.
It's not every day that I get to speak to my best friend about another creation. I've seen literally your whole journey from like day one and book number 1, and now you're here. It's just phenomenal. So I really want to know, what was the reason behind Give Me Strength?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining the live stream. It's really exciting to have you here, and I really appreciate you showing up for publication launch event with Fane. Um, in terms of writing this book, it really has been a bit of a kind of cathartic moment to look back at the last 10 years. And as I'm sure some of you are aware, and maybe some of you aren't, it's definitely been a bit of a rocky journey to get to where I am here. And when I was meeting with my publisher in the kind of early days of us coming up with what the book might look like and might be, my ambition was to really, I guess, kind of put down in words a reflection of everything that I've learned and gone through. And I remember when I was saying to them, it doesn't sort of, to me, feel like I'm unique in what I've gone through. If anything, I wanted to write this book because I felt my story, in some ways what you've gone through, in some ways what a lot of us as women have gone through, is so deeply relatable and is something that has touched almost every woman that I've ever come across, whether that's feelings of not being good enough or struggling with body image, difficulties with food, a difficult relationship with exercise. All of these themes sort of have a lot of synergy with all of the women that I was coming across. And as I shifted my approach and I embarked on my own healing journey, I felt, sort of coming out the other side of that there was so much that needed to be said when it came to what went wrong for me and how maybe I can help other women not go down that same path. So Give Me Strength was kind of born out of that. And it was born out of an ambition to help the next generation, help the current generation, help anyone who looks at my story and thinks, yeah, that sounds like me, or that sounds like something that I've gone through or I've felt. And so if I hadn't explained already, it's sort of part memoir, really, a look back and a chat through so many difficult stages and moments in my life, as well as loads of good ones as well. There's been lots of happy moments too. And then the second section is really kind of my exercise ethos. It's everything that if I was starting today as day one of my exercise journey, this is everything that I think you need to know in order to start out on that path in a positive, healthy, and sustainable way.
And you have changed and evolved so much, Alice. I mean, we have been friends for nearly 10 years. That's a decade of growing, and just I have seen you absolutely blossom in confidence. And that's not just as a friend, that's seeing you as a businesswoman, as just a supernova in the industry. And you have so many people that look up to you and just honestly, not worship's probably the wrong word, but there are people that worship you. And you have such a gorgeous relatability. Like you said, maybe you feel like your journey is not unique because we have all, as women, kind of grown with you over that 10 years, especially those that have followed you for as long as I've known you. And you started out as this faceless account that just showed your breakfast and your scrambled eggs and all of this. And then we've kind of seen more and more of Alice like trickling through and got to know you more. And as that journey has kind of opened you up, I feel like you have got that real like self-assured, you know who you are, you know what you're talking about. And you, one thing I adore about you is that you never stop learning, and that is such a big thing for you. You want to be the best PT to help as many women as possible, not to flex your abs and show how many push-ups you can do. You show such a gorgeous holistic way of working out and looking after yourself. And I think that 10 years of like we've had an insight and tiny like slither, you shared a tiny slither of your life in that 10 years. But do you look back at that and think, wow, I just want to give that Alice 10 years ago a cuddle? Or do you think, thank goodness I went through that so that I am at the stage now where I'm helping so many more women?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I really, you know, it's the kind of difficult question, isn't it? Do you wish you could write and erase everything and start again? Or do you actually look back and think, oh, I learned from every mistake? And I'm definitely of the belief that in life, all of us are fallible human beings, and all of us will make mistake after mistake after mistake. And the reality is that like, that's so important for us to understand. And so, you know, even when it came to writing this book, it was deeply important for me to have some level of compassion for myself, not to kind of use it as an opportunity just to berate everything I did, because where's the value in that? It was about looking back at all of these moments. And I can absolutely, in one breath, say that they were mistakes. They were. But at the same time, I'm able to look at them as absolute learnings, things that have then propelled me on to want to instigate change within the industry in which I exist. And they're things that have thankfully enabled me to be the happy person that I am sat here right now. So, you know, in life, and not just within this kind of context, I do really believe that we're allowed to make mistakes and we're allowed to be fallible as humans, as long as we are able to look back and say, here's how I can do better. And so I think that the book really is a manifestation of that in itself. You know, it's about looking back and saying, I can do better, and I want to put out that positive change that I now believe to be the case into the industry. And here's how I kind of want to do it, and here's the message that I want to bring. So yeah, I do look back on the last 10 years as being learning after learning after learning. And with my positive hat on, I definitely feel that that's the case.
And you say mistakes, but I don't believe they were mistakes, as a friend, but also as someone that really admires what you do. I think there are obviously things like when you then went through, and you, like, in hindsight, we look back and we go, what we portrayed at the beginning of Instagram was so different to what our language is now, and like how we speak about our bodies and everything. And I would love to know the mistake that you kind of wish, writing the book, it must have been so cathartic, like you said, to have that reflection. And was there any chapter, were there any bits in the book that you found so difficult that you almost had to step away and come back to it maybe a week later?
Yeah, it's so funny that you asked that, because just as you were saying it, like immediately I know this the section that springs to mind for me. And I think that I started out, as I'm sure many people who are watching know, with best intentions, as we all do. You know, I never believed that I was causing harm, and it was never my intention to in any way do any, you know, sort of harm to anyone that consumed the content that I was creating. But there definitely became this kind of shifting or tipping point whereby I'd continued along this path of sort of disordered eating without realizing that's what it was, exercise addiction without realizing that that's what it was. And at some point, I think I definitely started to be a little bit dishonest with my audience. And dishonesty is not something that I am comfortable with, and I don't like it in my life. You know, as my friend, I'm like an open book. I try and be as honest and kind as I can. But there was definitely this kind of smoke and mirrors effect that I was having on my audience, showing one thing to them whilst there being a different story behind closed doors. And that's not something that I'm comfortable with. And, you know, to your question, when writing about this, it wasn't an easy thing to do, to own up to sort of put pen to paper on, and I guess to really accept that that was not a great time of my journey. But I think it is definitely an important piece of the puzzle. And I also think that it's a poignant reminder for all of us who now find ourselves on social platforms to just sort of remember that, you know, that's still the case in a lot of instances. There is so much ability for there to be, this is the world that I'm going to portray, and this is what I'm actually experiencing. And I think that it's important to have boundaries with social media, but there's a big difference between that in terms of keeping some stuff public and some stuff private, and being dishonest with what the reality is of what you're trying to portray. So when it came to things like the food that I was eating, you know, there was a specific instance in the book where I wrote about sort of many times posting something that I had eaten when the reality was that might have been what someone else on the table had. And
Mm.
this wasn't like, you know, a one-off thing. This was a number of occasions. And I think deep down, I obviously recognized that that was potentially harmful. But I guess what I was trying to do was just keep up this pretense that everything was okay and that my relationship with food was fine and that I was just kind of surviving. And I liken it to that kind of that swan analogy, right? You're gliding along on the surface and looking oh so great and like, aren't I successful? Isn't everything wonderful? And underneath, you're just like deeply kind of paddling away and just desperately trying to stay afloat. And you know, like it's a great analogy because the reality was that like at some points I felt like I was just drowning in the pressure of it all. And, you know, having books to write and having, you know, all of these opportunities handed to me on a plate. And at the age of 22, 24, 26, you know, not really being able to say, hang on a second, I can't do this. I'm not okay. And so I guess, you know, going back to your original question, that was very difficult for me to write about. And it's something that I will deeply regret, you know, forever. Yes, I've come to terms with it to a certain extent, but does it mean that it's right? No. And so that's definitely a section of the book that I found challenging to kind of go through.
Like you said, there was never a point where you could step back and go, whoa, hold on, because you have a background in performance and you have a background in musical theatre, and we obviously only having like a snippet of what you went through in your training, we have this tendency to step on stage and become someone that is a fictional character, and that may have trickled into your original Instagram like persona. And I feel like we never really addressed the responsibility we had until Instagram was a thing. People used to say to us like, what are you doing posting on Instagram? What are you posting a smoked salmon, Alice? And it's interesting because anyone who asks me how I got into Instagram, I say it was genuinely through our relationship. And it was before Instagram even had video content, and we were obviously just posting stills. And I remember from the moment I met you, you had this authenticity about you and this gorgeous warmth, but I feel like you were trapped in this almost like, I've still got to keep performing. And that, I don't think you should ever regret what you did, because you were not causing harm. Like you said, we were just doing what we thought was right at the time for Instagram and the platform. But I would love to know, for anyone watching, whether you're a young girl or you are a parent of a young girl like myself, you're obviously an auntie to a young girl and you've seen her from scratch. And I look at Aurelia and I go, wow, you are a blank canvas. You have no perception of your body right now. What would you say to any parent of young children, and this is all genders, to protect them from the experiences that we had, that hatred and that I'm so desperate to change my body to fit in? What would you say, that daily conversation with your child, how should you approach that? And obviously I appreciate that's quite a weight, but I just really find it interesting, like how should we be speaking to young children about exercise and about our bodies?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like huge, isn't it? And I just kind of want to assure anyone that there is no best practice when it comes to
Mm.
this. Like, there are going to be lots of different ways in which you might have conversations around these things that feel right and authentic for you. So I don't want to kind of like, especially not as not being a parent myself, sort of say this is the way to do it, because I haven't quite haven't quite crossed that journey yet. But I definitely think there are some really key cornerstones that I'd say are covered in the book, which I think are really critical for us to kind of have a greater understanding of how we find ourselves in this position, and maybe some of the things that would be great to sort of chat to anyone about, whether it's your child, your partner, your auntie, grandma, mum, whatever, because this stuff's intergenerational. I think that's what we have to remember.
Mm.
You know, in the book, one of the things that I really looked back on was the relationship that my mum had with exercise and with food, and how that was absolutely mirrored in myself, and how a lot of those behaviors, whether consciously or subconsciously, were repeated by me. So we have to remember that this stuff is passed down. And so, yeah, I think that coming back to your question, one of the crucial things that we look at in the book is the way that exercise is sold to us. Because I remember growing up, and I was never one of the sporty kids. I was pretty rubbish at every single sport I tried. Dance was my thing, so I definitely moved my body. But in a kind of sports school setting, I was pretty terrible at everything. So I wrote myself off as not being good at exercise. And the only time that I then therefore reconnected with it was when I wanted to change my body. And I very clearly remember exercise being sold in this very binary kind of one-dimensional view that it is solely there when you want to lose weight or change yourself. There was no conversation around enjoyment, longevity, fun, health implications, mindset, cognitive function, all of the things that we know that exercise is brilliant for. None of this was ever part of the conversation. And I think especially as women, we're not offered in the same capacity the benefits that I think men get when it comes to sport. Often there's so much kind of like, team bonding and all this sort of stuff. And I think as women, we do team sports. That's not to say we don't. But I think that my experience was very much that if you're not sporty, you disengage with it. And, we've got some really interesting stats in the book about how and why women are disengaging at such an exponential rate from exercise. There are some awful stats about the rate at which young girls and women are disengaging with exercise when they leave school, and why is that, and looking at some of the implications of that as well. So the reality is that exercise is a difficult thing to sell to people unless you sell it in the right way. And for so long, it's been sold, like I said, in such a one-dimensional package that for so many people, there's just nothing there for them to engage with. We also have to look at all of the barriers to entry when it comes to exercise, whether it's your socioeconomic background, whether it's your struggles with body image, whether it's your menstrual cycle, whatever it might be, we know that that is also a really important factor. So when it comes to your point, having conversations around exercise, I think it's about one, sort of taking it into a wider context of movement. And we use the word movement a lot across the book because for me, it sort of encompasses a slightly more holistic approach to just moving. We naturally move every single day. And if we can all just move a little bit more, then that's going to be a good thing for our health. When it comes to how we then look at exercise, it's about, why am I moving? What am I getting from it? Am I enjoying the movement that I'm doing? Does it feel like a punishment? Does it feel like a chore? Am I feeling guilty if I therefore don't do it? And understanding that there are so many ways in which we can engage with movement in a positive way and in a way that has, longevity and is sustainable for the rest of our lives, rather than being something that we only engage with when we need to change our bodies. And then, when it comes to kind of the wider conversation around body image and, how we feel about ourselves, I think that there is definitely so much to be said. And look, you're like a wonderful advocate for this as well. So like I'm speaking and preaching to the converted, but it really is about kind of reminding those around us, those that we have conversations with, whether it's a fleeting conversation with a woman that I might have on the tube, and I've had many of those, or whether it's someone that's deeply close to us, about how much we are just incredible human beings, and that all of those incredible, wonderful things that people love about us have nothing to do with our bodies. I want my body to be strong and to be capable, and I train for those things, but I know that if you took all of that away, that I'm still a good person, that I still am a lovable and kind and happy and fulfilled person. And I sort of think that I feel that it's almost impossible for us not to be marginally, in the least instance, kind of impacted by all of the messaging around us in terms of thin is ideal, and you have to look to social media, to TikTok, to seeing all of the kind of next generation of young girls that I see growing up that are being bombarded with the same stuff that you and I probably had when we were that age. But I think it's about kind of bolstering the women around us, whether they're close to us or like I said, in a fleeting instance, with the confidence to know that they don't have to conform to any ideal, that they are perfect as they are, that they are beautiful, that they are lovable, that they are so amazing as they are, without them feeling as though just because their body doesn't find it kind of fit this very binary one size fits all ideal, that they're not good enough.
Yeah, it's wild what you said, that young girls are still being fed that messaging that we were back 10 years ago. And because we're in the epicenter of Instagram and social media, and we see what we think is the change, and actually on the outside the messaging is still the same kind of language, and you are disrupting all of that. And I would love to know, Alice, that conversation that you have with yourself, that inner dialogue, that inner monologue, before, during, and after your workouts. How do you speak to yourself? What do you say when you're about to step out the door to go to a workout? What do you say when you're doing the workout? And what is that conversation like with yourself after the workout? I want to get inside your brain.
Well, it's a really good question, because I literally released a podcast episode this week that's called "I'm the least motivated personal trainer there is." Like, so actually, I think it's really helpful. Like, I love moving my body. Don't get me wrong, but I am someone who finds motivation a real struggle to come by sometimes. And so I love that question, because you're so right. I have absolutely changed my approach to exercise, and that means that none of my motivation at all comes from a place of, guilt or punishment, or needing to somehow earn or burn any food that I've enjoyed and consumed. So when it comes to how I now motivate myself, because I'll be honest, those things absolutely used to be what drove me to the gym. And maybe that's why I now see myself as kind of quote unquote unmotivated. Uh, Perhaps I'm not. I mean, I just find sometimes I could just sack it off and be like, yeah, I can't be asked. I
Don't
know
we all?
I know. But I know that I never want to go back to that place, I never want to go back to a place where I'm on the gym floor and I'm checking my watch to see how many calories
Mm.
I've burned, or I'm watching the clock thinking, oh, I haven't quite done an hour, so that's not a good enough workout. These are things that we tell ourselves, these kind of strange, tick box things that we feel we have to adhere to when it comes to exercise, whether it's, you must sweat every time you go to the gym, you must burn X amount of calories, you must do X amount of steps a day, you must make sure that you've trained for at least an hour, otherwise it doesn't count. All these things that I think I used to believe, I now don't let those things absolutely dictate kind of any of my sort of motivation to exercise. So to your question, like, where does my motivation come from? What are the conversations that I'm having? It's very much around, how does exercise make me feel? What am I feeling like today? Like, I'll be completely honest, recently I've been really busy, and I've been finding myself a little bit stressed and a little bit stretched. I've done lots of travel, and that's meant that my exercise has definitely gone off a cliff. And so also, one of the conversations that I sort of have is, what does my body really need today? Woke up this morning, it was the first time in ages that I had time to go to the gym, but I'm battling a bit of a shoulder injury at the moment, and I was feeling a little bit tired, and I thought, you know what, I don't need to go to the gym. Like, why am I doing that? In fact, actually, it was the most stunning morning. The sun was shining.
Oh,
I was like, do you know what? I've got about 10 podcasts on my want to listen to list.
love.
Head outside, I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to listen to that instead. And I did 40 minutes of walking, and I came
Perfect.
back, and I was so at peace with my decision. And I think it's because it is about honoring that kind of intuitive nature of, what do I feel like I want to do to move my body today? And like I said, it's such a big shift from where I came from. And sometimes, Jessie, that answer is, I want to go to the gym and I want to absolutely smash out some pull-ups. I love feeling strong and feeling empowered. And those things are such a core part. The book is called Give Me Strength. So those things are such a core part of who I am and what I enjoy, and definitely the training that I want to try and get people to try and engage with, even if it's just on a kind of very basic level. Resistance training makes up a big part of how I move my body. But in terms of motivating myself, sometimes that's not always the answer. During my session, I think that the things I really focus on are kind of tangible moments of goals, working towards getting, you know, my pull-ups, which has always, you know, been a big goal of mine for the last like year. I've been working on that. Whether it's trying to improve the quality of the movement within an exercise, or you know, being able to increase the load in a certain exercise so that I'm kind of getting stronger in particular movements. There are lots of ways in which I can kind of tangibly notice progress in my training that have such kind of greater feedback as to how I'm improving, rather than, oh, I've burned 200 calories, woohoo, you know, which is likely highly inaccurate anyway. So, and actually, that's actually a good point. In the book, we have this whole section about how wildly inaccurate fitness trackers actually are, and how they're not a great, in fact, a terrible determinant of how your work, like good or bad, your workout is. So back to what I was saying is that during it's those kind of tangible goals, and we have a section about kind of goal setting and intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And then afterwards, I think it's about also reconnecting with that, first of all, like post-workout nice high. I mean, even if it's just a walk, like I always feel good after moving my body. But trying to kind of connect that back to something positive, you know, I feel energized, or I feel, and you know, like I'm a big fan of Mel Robbins, right? Like I am a total paid up member of the fan club. And I was listening to a podcast of hers this morning, and it's this like she's done research into I think it was 175,000 people did this research where they high-fived themselves in the morning in the mirror every day, and that it drastically improved their self-confidence. And I do think that there's something to be said for, like, even post-exercise, if you're trying to reframe your relationship with exercise, like trying to bring it back to saying something that has nothing to do with your body. You know, when you finish your session going, I feel really energized, or I feel really awake, or I feel really happy, or I feel really accomplished or strong. You know, these are kind of things that even if you feel a bit silly saying it, and believe me, like I'm a bit cringy even saying it myself, but I do think that it helps to almost rewire that part of our brain that solely sees exercise as, oh God, have I done enough? And instead makes us see, wow, like my body just did that, or like I was able to do that, or whatever it might be. Even if it's just a walk, you know, I was able to get out and enjoy the sunshine. Isn't that such a nice thing? And so I think that afterwards, that's definitely the conversations that I'm having. That was a really long answer, Chessie. So I'm so
No, I loved that. Thank you, Alice. And I was thinking whilst you were talking about, you have your grandparents who I adore, and all your friends and family adore. Anyone who's ever met them just has this admiration for Alice's grandparents. And at the wedding, I watched them and I thought, how incredible that you are moving your body, and they look so strong and they look so just happy and healthy. And I honestly think my narrative has changed so much that I now think of my 80-year-old self. I think of 80-year-old Chessie, and I was like your grandparents. I look at them and I go, what would she want? What would 80-year-old Chessie say right now? Would she ever look back? Have you ever heard your grandma look back, say to you, Alice, I remember when I went to the gym and I burnt 500 calories? Or do you think like 80-year-old you would look back and go, I did 20 pull-ups when I was 30 years old? Like, how incredible is that? And I think that we have so much to learn from the older generation. And I've been very lucky with my mum that she has installed this in me, and I have that appreciation for future me. And I'm like, I'm doing this for future me. I want to be able to go traveling when I'm 80 and take my suitcase and be able to carry it myself. And I want to run after, hopefully, my grandchildren and just keep up with the one that I've got now. But I would love to know, Alice, you have 4 pillars that you have kind of split your exercise or what would you say? It's your own formula, isn't it?
my manifesto for exercise, basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I actually just wanted to come to a point that came up for me when you were saying that, Chessie, because my grandparents are amazing and I am obsessed with them. But I think it really brings up a wider conversation around the big difference between aesthetics and health, right? Because the reality was that when I was at my smallest, I presented as this kind of super lean 6-pack, you know, lean arms, and on paper, many people would perceive me to be like a vision of health. You know, I would receive countless messages from women. How did you do this? Like, oh my God, your body is goals, this, that. And all of this kind of compounded that validation that I felt like I needed at the time, and sort of gave me that, I guess, false sense of confidence, although it wasn't true confidence, let's be honest. But I think that what it really brings up for me is, you know, when you were saying about this like kind of longevity conversation, it really does remind me of how different those two things are, because you can look, and we're so used to being visual human beings and looking at someone and making a judgment on their health versus like the reality of what's going on for someone. And I do think it's a very important reminder, you know, my body at its smallest was not healthy. I had no menstrual cycle, something that I cover deeply in the book and talk about. I was miserable and lonely. I was constantly fatigued. I was ruled by discipline. And, you know, I just think that reflecting on that definitely did bring up that wider conversation around what actually is health. What does health genuinely look like? Because it's going to look different for all of us. But the reality is that we can't make a judgment on someone by just looking at them. And in doing so, that was what kind of got me into that mess in the first place, sort of trying to look the part, but not actually being it. So I too looked to my grandparents. My grandfather is 91, going to be 92. He was the last person on the dance floor at my wedding. He's never stepped in a gym in his life. But what he has done is he's moved. He has been very social. His sport is now bowls. Like, he's a member of the local bowls club. And like, I also can't wait for hopefully, touch wood and God willing, being, you know, in that position myself. And I think it's a very important reminder when we look to that generation of, you know, they didn't spend hours in the gym often, many of them. They definitely had key components of what we know to be health. But that can be that they moved a lot quite naturally and intuitively every day, and that they, you know, kept active, kept social, ate a balanced and varied diet, you know, all of the things that we know make up the complex picture that is health. Sorry, I wanted to say that, but then coming on to your question, because I would love to speak about the 4 pillars. So in the book, like I said in this, so in the book, like I said at the start of the conversation, we sort of used section 1 as talking a little bit about myself and my journey, but section 2 is really all about you, and it's about everything that I wish I knew if I was starting today as my day 1 of my exercise journey. So it's filled with information, broken down into 4 key pillars, and those are the what, the why, the how, and the when. And within each of those 4 pillars, what we try to do, I say it as if there were other people.
Me and my hands, writing, typing.
What I decided to do was to really to kind of include in each of those just every piece of information that you could need to kind of get you started. And also, you know, the book isn't loaded with data and stats. What it is, I hope, is a bit of a nurturing voice. You know, one of the things that I prided myself on when I was a personal trainer was that I was never the fanciest personal trainer. I never had all the research and all this and all that. Don't get me wrong, like, I was credible and I know what I'm doing. But I felt that what I had, which was my secret sauce, was that I had a deep amount of empathy for the clients that I saw, because I was seeing women, you know, across the board, all sorts of different women who were going through different things. But there was a very concurrent thread. And that thread was negative self-talk, body image issues, and never feeling satisfied with how they looked. And so I think that when it comes to taking someone on an exercise journey, it's about coming at that with empathy, with understanding, with a gentle voice. You don't need to be told that you need to hit 10,000 steps every day and you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. That only serves to make someone feel worse about themselves, in my opinion. What they need is, here's a little bit of information, right? Take it, think about it. Maybe today you're going to input one of the things that I've given you. And that's all you're going to do for a couple of weeks. And that is fine. That would be amazing. If someone messaged me and said, I've tried one thing from your book and it's really worked for me, I'd say, hallelujah, I've done something great. But if you input, you know, 1, 2, over the course of a year, maybe 4 or 5 things that I've spoken about in the book, then great. But I want you to do it in a way that feels right for you and feels natural and feels at a correct pace for where you're at. Like I said, it is gentle, it is nurturing, it is with empathy and also with absolute understanding that I have probably been where you are and that I know that path that you're going to tread. And so I want to kind of hold your hand through it. And I think that's kind of where we've come from when it comes to sort of navigating those 4 pillars. So I really hope that that second section is really helpful. And like I said, even if you just take one thing from it, I am happy. But there's lots in there for you to apply to your own exercise journey.
So obviously, sorry, a little bit, honestly, your book is obviously called Give Me Strength, but that has come from your podcast, which is such a long-standing podcast, and I mean, incredible guests. Now, I would love to know, Alice, from all the conversations you've had with all these phenomenal people, what is one thing that someone has said as a guest that has stuck with you and that you almost repeat daily, or that always comes up in conversation? You're like, this one person told me this and it stuck with me. I would love to know.
Oh gosh, you put me on the spot. That's such a great question, because you're right. I've had so many amazing guests, and definitely some of the insight that I was kind of given from my guests has made it into the book, because I learned so much from everyone that I interview, whether that's, you know, Dr. Sophie Bostock, who's a sleep expert. You know, she is amazing, and I learned so much from her. Dr. Brendan, what's his name? Sorry, Dr. Brendan. Oh my God, scrap that. Sorry.
Just Dr. B.
Or, you know, the food medic, we had an amazing conversation with Hazel. And there's so many people, yourself, you've been on it, Chessie, and given us some amazing insight. So there are so many people, but I'm going to be really cheeky because I absolutely love every single one of my guests. And there is so much that I could say about all of them, but I'm actually going to use a quote from my girl, Mel Robbins, because she hasn't been on my podcast. I'm going to make it happen at some point in my life.
If you're listening to this, Mel, you're invited. You're invited.
But I was listening to a podcast that she did the other day, and there was a phrase that was so stuck with me that I was like, wow, that is basically how I want to live my life. And she said something along the lines of, someone is always going to be disappointed with how you live your life, but let it not be you. And for me, particularly as it pertains to the book, you know, I have tried my utmost to now close a door on a chapter of my life that I am both, you know, troubled by, I guess, but also immensely proud of. And obviously, as I'm sure you'll all read, it's in the book for you to kind of go through page by page. But as I move into the next chapter, as I kind of feel like I have this bolstered sense of confidence in who I am, in what I believe in how I want to impart that message onto my community and onto the wider industry, you know, I feel that I can now, in the place that I am, have great impact on the industry around me. And I intend to do that. You know, it's a quote that I basically will now, and I have done since I listened to that podcast, have said to myself daily, because the reality is that we cannot be everything to everyone, right? And we cannot be everyone's cup of tea, and we cannot be perfect. You know, if there was one thing that I learned from writing this book, nobody's perfect. We are all fallible. We all make mistakes. I started this conversation by saying that, and I'll bring it back to that. I'm totally of that belief. But in terms of how we choose to live our life, if we're constantly living it to please other people, we're not living our lives, you know? And so to bring it back to that quote, like, there are always going to be people who are disappointed by how you live your life, but the one person that shouldn't be disappointed is you. So just make sure that everything you do, everything that you now kind of engage in, and every decision that you make, let it be one that you not anyone else, is comfortable and happy with. And I think that's a great way to be and to live your life. So as much as I adore my guest, I had to make it that one because it's been on the tip of my tongue and in my brain for the last couple of weeks. And I think it's a brilliant way to live your life.
So, Alice, big question, because I don't think you would ever do this, but if you deleted your entire Instagram account and rebranded yourself and came back as Alice right now on the day of her 4th book publication day, what would you post?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think looking back, like you and I both know that we were not alone in everything we went through, and we were absolutely a product of the wider context that we existed in. You know, when I look back and I reflect on when I started, you know, even the fact that I chose Clean Eating Alice as my name, I said it in the book, like it's one of my favorite lines, where I was like, imagine choosing your first email address. That's basically how I chose my handle. Like, my first email address was sexy_bunny_girl. I mean, my mum must have been absolutely horrified. Horrified.
Alice, mine was, I don't need your attitude. I've got enough of my own at hotmail.com. Like dishing it out like for business at 14.
I can't. But I just think that that we, you know, we were just part of that whole context of the Special K diet, and, you know, the Thin is In and the Tumblr and the MySpace and all of these, you know, things that contributed towards how we found ourselves in the positions that we did. So that was then. And I guess now, if I were to say what I was going to post, I think, well, I love a long caption, and actually I'm really reverting back to them. Like more recently, I'm really enjoying, like I'm actually much better writing, I think, sometimes than I am speaking. Like I love writing. I love to write things down. And I think I'd probably do some kind of a, I don't know, a post where I just pour my heart out. I mean, Instagram's so wonderful for being vulnerable and open. So I'd probably say something like, oh, I'm just like loving life and feeling great. And I hope you all are too. But I think
love that.
I've learned so much about, you know, who I am. And I think that, you know, if today were day one of my Instagram journey, if it were, I would hope that it would be as my authentic self. And I wouldn't feel the need to, as we've spoken about in this conversation, pretend to be anything other than, or not be honest about everything that's going on. So yeah, I would hope that I would continue with that same positive ethos.
Oh, Alice, you are so special, and I am so lucky to know you on a personal level and to have seen this entire decade of evolving. And even if someone meets you for a millisecond on the tube, like you said, just meeting you and going, hi, Alice, like giving you a hug and then running off, or if someone's known you your entire life, all your beautiful cousins, all your family, you, from literally a second to knowing you your whole life and everything in between, you have this gorgeous, rare, special quality that you make everyone feel so comfortable. And so I've always said it to you, you make me feel at home in myself, that I can be myself. And no, but you've got this gorgeousness, and I want everyone to be able to see it, because you really are such a rare human, and you have helped more people than you will ever know. And every single person who is listening to this, who's watching this, will want to know, how are you celebrating your 4th book today? Are you going to go home and snuggle up with Paddy and just give yourself a little cheers, or are you going to really have a moment on your own of self-reflection and go, wow, I've done this, I've written my 4th book?
Well, I have to say that Paddy is actually away on a golf trip.
Of course he is.
Classic. So I have a book launch that's happening this evening, and I'm so excited. And look, I have to say, like, a huge thanks to the team at Penguin, who have been unbelievably supportive in this book writing journey. Like it's been obviously, for those of you who might not be aware, I moved publishers, and it's been nothing short of incredible working with them. My editor, Amy, Karina, who's on this call, like the whole of the team have been amazing. And so we're all going to be celebrating this evening. And I have, you know, a nice outfit to put on, and I can't wait to see some of my favorite people there. But I think that you're right. Like, I am probably going to have a bit of a moment where I just am on my own and I kind of have a real, I'll probably cry because I'm a crier. And it's my way of really, if I'm happy, I cry. If I'm sad, I cry. If I'm stressed, I cry. Crying is great. So I'll probably do that on my own in the bath, just be like, and then move.
Well,
But
I'll be there
it's all
cuddling
in a
you
good
whilst you're
place.
crying.
But Chessie, thank
Exactly.
you so much as well for interviewing
Oh,
me. Like
Alice.
I couldn't think of anyone better to have gone through this journey and this conversation with. And I'm so grateful for you for being so wonderful and asking some brilliant questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alice. And here's to number 4, give me strength, and you can go get it anywhere you can get books. Is that correct? Literally anywhere.
So yeah, the book is available everywhere. You can get it on Amazon, Waterstones, or any great bookstore. So yeah, you can find them there.